Every story begins long before the opening shot, before the dialogue, before the conflict. It begins in the quiet place where emotion lives. The ache, the longing, the memory you can't quite name. Welcome to Backstory Movies, a space for people who don't just watch films, they feel them, who listen for the silence between lines, who notice the way a character breathes when they're holding back the truth, who understand that sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones that never fully happen. Here, we explore cinema the way it was meant to be experienced, through emotion, psychology, and the invisible threads that pull characters and us towards something deeper. If you've ever walked out of a movie carrying a feeling you just couldn't shake, you're in the right place. This is Backstory Movies, where every frame has a heartbeat and every story has a soul.
Okay, so I want you to picture a scenario, and I'm not talking about just a vague feeling. I want you to inhabit a very specific, visceral, physical state.
Mm-hmm.
You're on your couch. It's, I don't know, 11:00 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Right.
You are 2 hours into a movie, 2 full hours, and the two main characters, they they haven't even held hands yet.
It is a very specific kind of torture, isn't it? But wow, is it effective?
It's not just torture, it's physiological.
Yeah.
I mean, your palms are sweating like actually damp, your heart rate is up. You're basically having a flight or fight response, but you're just watching two people stand across a room from each other.
Right.
You are screaming, internally for them to just bridge that 3-foot gap. Just do it.
Yeah.
But they don't. And here's the really weird part.
Okay.
If they did kiss right then, in that moment, the whole thing would just pop like a cheap balloon. The tension would be gone. The fact that they aren't touching is exactly what makes the experience perfect.
That is the central paradox of the slow burn. We tend to think of romance as, the act of connection, the kiss, the confession, but the slow burn argues that romance is actually the architecture of the obstacle. It's all about the delay.
Right, and that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to explore what critics and fans, what everyone calls the masochistic pleasure dome of these kinds of narratives. It's not just a pacing device. It's a full-on art form designed to leave you emotionally wrecked.
In the best possible way, of course.
Of course.
Exquisite torture is the phrase that often comes up in film theory when you read about this genre. And it really is about distinguishing between, say, the Hollywood ending and what feels more like the human experience.
Let's define our terms a little bit, because I feel like slow burn is a term that gets thrown around a lot, on TikTok or whatever. We're not talking about a Hallmark movie where they bake some cookies and then they fall in love in 85 minutes flat.
No, absolutely not. The Hallmark model, and look, I'm not disparaging it, it serves a purpose, is usually what you'd call a fast burn, or maybe a formulaic burn. You know the beats.
You know by heart.
They meet cute. There's a small misunderstanding. They resolve it by the third act. They kiss. The end. The slow burn is totally different. It's about the messy, glacial, almost painful reality of falling in love. It completely avoids that whirlwind courtship idea from Golden Age Hollywood, where love was just a thunderclap.
The thunderclap,
Yeah.
yes. You see someone across a crowded ballroom, the violins swell, and boom, you're basically married by the next scene.
Exactly, that's efficiency. But the films we're going to be talking about today, films from In the Mood for Love to Portrait of a Lady on Fire, they all argue that delayed gratification is infinitely more intoxicating, more powerful than immediate fulfillment.
So the hook for today is really
Yeah.
why? Why do we crave this specific kind of agony? Why does watching two people not touch feel somehow more intense than watching them connect?
Well, to understand that, I think we have to look at the psychology of yearning itself. We have to look at what's actually happening in our brains when we're denied what we want on screen.
Okay, so let's start there with the psychology. There's a metaphor that keeps coming up in the analysis of these films, and I love it. It's erosion versus thunderclap.
This is crucial. The thunderclap is, at its core, narrative shorthand. It's a quick way for a movie to tell the audience, okay, these people are in love now, got it, let's move on.
Right. It's an info dump.
It is, but real intimacy is so rarely a lightning strike. It's erosion. Think of, water wearing down a stone grain by grain over years and years.
It sounds exhausting, honestly.
It is, but it's also permanent. And the argument is that these stories, they act as a mirror. They validate that excruciating limbo that I think most of us have actually lived through at some point. You know, that stage where you aren't sure if you're just friends or something else.
The situationship, the modern purgatory, everyone's been there.
Precisely. But chemically, something really interesting is happening in our brains when we watch that play out. There's a concept in neuroscience called prediction error. Your brain is basically a prediction machine. It's constantly trying to figure out what will happen next.
Okay.
In a slow burn, every single time the characters almost touch or almost confess but don't, your brain's prediction fails. And when a prediction fails, you get a spike of attention. It creates this little dopamine loop. You become sort of addicted to the eventual resolution of that error.
So we're not just emotional masochists. We're actually just chasing a dopamine fix. Like lab rats.
In a way, yeah. We are desperately waiting for the pattern to complete, for the prediction to finally come true. The longer it's denied, the bigger the reward feels when it finally happens.
That makes so much sense. And it also explains why this kind of story resonates so much right now.
Right.
Specifically, we live in this era of instant gratification, of swiping you up, yes, no. We've sort of optimized all the mystery out of romance.
We have. We've turned dating into logistics. If you want an answer, you just text them. If you want a date, you swipe. There is very, very little ambiguity left in modern courtship.
And you think ambiguity is where the romance actually lives.
Ambiguity is where the fantasy lives. When you don't know, you project. You fill in the blanks with your own hopes and desires. These films, they force us to sit in that uncomfortable, ambiguous space for 2, sometimes 3 hours. It's a powerful reminder that, friction adds value. The things you wait for are often the things that matter most.
Or, and maybe this is the more cynical take, maybe we just like the safety of it all. I can experience the sweet agony of a 3-year pining session from my couch, while eating popcorn, without any of the actual risk of getting my heart broken.
Oh, absolutely. That's the safe danger of all cinema, isn't it? You get the full emotional workout, but without any of the real-world consequences.
Okay, let's move from the abstract to the concrete, because you cannot have this conversation without bowing down to the absolute master of this. We have to talk about Wong Kar-wai, and we have to talk about In the Mood for Love.
This is the definitive text on restraint. It's the Bible of the slow burn.
I remember the first time I watched this film. I put it on casually on a weeknight, thinking, oh, I'll watch 20 minutes and then go to bed.
Yeah.
4 hours later, I was just staring at my ceiling, completely wrecked by it.
It haunts you. It stays with you. And it does that through a very, very specific cinematic mechanic. The film essentially treats love like a ghost.
A ghost? How do you mean?
I mean, it haunts every single frame, but it's never fully made flesh. You have the two main characters, Chamuan and Sulu-Zhen. They're neighbors in 1962 Hong Kong. And they discover, slowly, that their respective spouses are having an affair with each other.
So they bond over this shared betrayal, but they make this pact that they won't be like their spouses.
Exactly. So the restriction is self-imposed. It's a moral boundary they draw for themselves. It's honor, and it's also societal pressure. But look at how Wong Kar-wai shoots them. He almost never gives you a clean, open shot of the two of them together. They're always filmed through doorways or reflected in mirrors or squeezed into these narrow, claustrophobic alleyways.
You feel like you're spying on them. The whole thing feels illicit, even though they're not doing anything.
You're spying, and because they never explicitly say, I love you, or let's run away until it's much, much too late, the audience has to become a detective. You are forced to decode every single glance. You are analyzing the way their shoulders almost brush in a noodle shop.
It demands your full attention. If you look down at your phone for even 5 seconds, you might miss the entire development of their relationship.
You will, absolutely. It's a film about the almost, the what if, and that almost ends up being far more powerful and memorable than any yes could ever be.
Speaking of these tiny moments, these micro movements, let's talk about the heavy artillery of the slow burn genre. We have to talk about Pride and Prejudice.
Ah, yes.
Specifically the 2005 Joe Wright version.
Of course. The one that tends to divide the Jane Austen purists, but absolutely unites the tension lovers.
We have to break down the hand flex. I mean, this is a moment that launched 1,000 GIFs. It is legendary in the Slow Burn Hall of Fame. But for anyone who hasn't, scrutinized it frame by frame, walk us through what happens.
Okay, so context is everything here. Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet have been dancing around each other this whole movie. They've been verbally sparring. They've been misunderstanding each other at every turn. He is, socially awkward, incredibly proud, very stiff.
Right. A man made of right angles.
Exactly. And in this scene, he's helping her into a carriage, a completely mundane action.
And usually in any other movie, this is a throwaway transition shot. It's just, okay, get in the car, on to the next scene.
Right. But here, the camera makes it the whole scene. He takes her hand to help her up. She steps into the carriage. He releases her hand. She sits down. He turns and walks away. But the camera doesn't follow her. It stays on him. It pushes in on his hand.
And as he walks away, his hand just, it spasms. He stretches the fingers out, flexing them hard.
It's so visceral, it looks like he just touched a hot stove.
Yes, or an electric fence.
It's electricity. It implies that that brief, socially required touch was so overwhelming to his system that he physically has to shake it off. He's trying to hold on to the sensation of her skin while at the same time trying to expel the energy that it just created in him.
And not a single word is spoken about it.
That is the absolute key. If he had said something, you have soft hands, Miss Bennett, it'd be so cheesy. It would ruin everything. But the blocking, the acting, and the intense camera focus, they tell us everything we need to know about his internal state. It's pure visual storytelling.
I want to contrast that with the scene that comes later, the first proposal. The disastrous one in the rain.
The thunderclap that goes horribly wrong.
Totally. Because the hand flex is all silent, repressed tension. The proposal is this loud, chaotic release. They're finally saying what they think. They're screaming at each other. They're inches apart. It's pouring rain all around them.
And notice the difference in the erotic charge. The proposal scene is incredibly intense, but it's an angry intensity. It's a release of all that frustration that's been built up by the silence and the repression. The hand flex builds the pressure. The rain proposal explodes it. You need those quiet, almost invisible moments to earn the loud ones.
That brings up a really interesting technical point. We're talking about visual storytelling, about glances and hands. But there's a term for this kind of tactile filmmaking, isn't there?
Yes, film theorists often call it haptic visuality.
Haptic visuality. Okay, break that down for us.
Haptic just relates to the sense of touch. Cinema is an audiovisual medium. You can't actually touch the screen. But great directors can use sound design and texture to trigger your sense of touch through your eyes and ears. When characters can't touch each other, the camera often becomes obsessed with texture as a way to compensate.
That's kind of sensory substitution.
Exactly that. The desire has to go somewhere. If it can't go to the other person's skin, it gets displaced. It goes into objects, into the environment.
The prime example here has to be Phantom Thread.
Oh, Paul Thomas Anderson, an absolute master of texture. This is a romance, or maybe an anti-romance, between a couturier, a high-fashion dressmaker, and his muse. The sound design is just filled with the aggressive rustling of taffeta, the sharp scratching of a pencil on paper, the sound of a needle pulling through silk.
It's almost like ASMR. It's so crisp, it's almost invasive.
But it's intimate. The sound of the fabric becomes a proxy for the intimacy they're negotiating. You feel the texture of the fabrics. You feel the tension between them. It's brilliant.
Or a movie like The Piano.
Jane Campion's film.
Yeah.
There, the piano is the ultimate substitution object. Holly Hunter's character, Ada, is mute. The piano is her voice, it's her soul, it's her body. So when Harvey Keitel's character, Baines, touches the piano, when he literally bargains to buy it from her, key by key, he is buying access to her inner self.
There's that one scene where he just lightly touches the wood of the piano while she's playing. It feels more explicit, more charged than a lot of sex scenes in modern blockbusters.
Because it's a violation and an adoration at the same time. You are watching a boundary being crossed, but it's not a physical one, not yet. It engages the viewer's imagination in a much deeper way. You have to actively decode the meaning of the object.
So we're looking at hands, we're listening to silk rustle. But what about when the tension is just silence, just pure empty space? I want to pivot here to Lost in Translation.
Sofia Coppola. This is, I think, the gold standard for the unspoken romance.
Right. You have Bob and Charlotte, Bill Murray, and Scarlett Johansson. They're two Americans stuck in a luxury hotel in Tokyo, and they're both stuck in their lives and their marriages. They are two profoundly lonely people.
And their romance, if you even want to call it that, is entirely a romance of recognition. It's not about, I want to sleep with you. It's about, oh, thank God you were just as lost and adrift as I am.
And there's so many scenes where they just sit, they share insomnia, they watch a terrible movie in his hotel room. There's no witty banter, really.
But notice the sound design in those quiet scenes. It's not true silence. You hear the low hum of the hotel air conditioning, the distant, muffled noise of the city outside. It creates this little bubble of isolation around just the two of them.
And then, of course, the ultimate slow burn move. The ending. The whisper.
The whispers on this strange, beautiful date we've been watching them. And in the final, climactic moment of connection, Coppola cuts the audio. Bob whispers something in her ear, and we don't get to know what it is.
It drives people crazy. People have been trying to decipher it for years.
And it should, but it honors the intimacy of that moment. It says, this moment belongs to them, not to you. It solidifies their connection by making it a secret. If we heard what he said, it would just be another line of dialogue, because it could be anything. It could be everything.
It exists in the space between them.
Exactly. The meaning is in the unspoken part.
Okay, let's move from a film about the unspoken to one that is almost entirely about the act of looking. We have to talk about Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Celine Sciamma, this film essentially weaponizes the female gaze and turns it into a slow burn engine.
For those who haven't seen it, the setup is it's perfect for this. Marianne is a painter in the 18th century, and she's commissioned to paint a wedding portrait of a young woman named Heloise. But the catch is, Heloise refuses to pose because she doesn't want to get married.
So Marianne has to pretend to just be a walking companion. She has to observe Heloise during the day, on their walks, at meals, and then go back and paint her from memory in secret at night.
So the entire premise requires intense, stolen observation. Marianne isn't just, checking her out. She is studying her. She's memorizing the curve of her ear, the way her hands move when she's frustrated. It's forensic.
The held breath. That's how so much of the criticism describes the feeling of watching it.
And there's this mythical layer here that we have to unpack because the film explicitly brings it up. It's the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice.
Right, the classic tragedy.
Remind us of the story. Orpheus goes to the underworld to rescue his dead wife, Eurydice. Hades agrees, but on one condition. He can't look back at her until you're both fully out in the sun. And of course,
he looks. At the last second, he turns back and she vanishes forever. But the film, through a discussion the characters have, poses a radical new interpretation. It argues that maybe he looks on purpose.
Why would he do that?
Because he chooses the memory of her over the reality of her. He chooses the poet's choice, not the lover's choice. He would rather have the perfect, tragic image of her to inspire his art for the rest of his life than the messy domestic reality of having her back.
My God. That is the slow burn manifesto right there, choosing the memory, the image, the yearning itself over the actual consummation.
Yes. And in the film, the tension just builds and builds to this breaking point. There's this recurring motif of page 28. It's a page in a book where Marianne draws a secret self-portrait for Heloise. It becomes their secret language, their one point of contact.
So when they finally kiss, the critics describe it as a dam breaking.
And it feels earned. It feels monumental because we, the audience, have done the work with them. We have watched Marianne watch Heloise for over an hour. We feel like we know that face as well as she does. So when that distance finally closes, it's a profound relief. It's almost geological, like watching pressure release after centuries.
But sometimes that pressure can't release.
Yeah.
Or at least the world won't let it. And that means we have to talk about obstacles.
External barriers are really the bread and butter of this genre. I mean, think about it. If two people like each other and there's absolutely no reason they can't be together, you don't have a movie. You have a 10-minute short film. You need the wall.
And in films like Carol or Brokeback Mountain, that wall is society itself.
It's fear. In Carol, it's the crushing morality of the 1950s and the specific threat of Carol losing custody of her child if her relationship with Therese is discovered. In Brokeback Mountain, it's violent, deadly homophobia and the internalized constraints of masculinity that keep Ennis and Jack apart.
It raises the stakes so much higher. It's not just, will she like me back? It's, will we survive this if she does?
And that turns the torture of waiting into something noble. We're not just watching two people pine. We're rooting for them to beat the entire system.
But I find it even more excruciating somehow when the obstacle isn't the law or a husband, but the character's own internal repression. I'm thinking of The Remains of the Day.
Oh, Anthony Hopkins and Emma Thompson. This is an absolute masterclass in the internal obstacle.
Hopkins plays Stevens, a butler at a grand English estate, who is so pathologically dedicated to his sense of dignity and duty that he has essentially amputated his own humanity. And Emma Thompson plays Miss Kenton, the housekeeper, who clearly deeply loves him.
And the tragedy is he loved her too. But he is physically and emotionally incapable of admitting it, even to himself.
We have to talk about the book scene, because if Pride and Prejudice has the hand flex, The Remains of the Day has the book scene. It's the emotional centerpiece.
It is the most erotic scene in the entire film, and it involves zero kissing, zero touching of skin. Stevens is sitting in his study, trying to have a rarer moment to himself, reading a book. Miss Kenton comes in. She's curious. She wants to see what he's reading. She suspects it might be something racy.
She's teasing him. She's flirting in the only way she knows how.
She is, and she corners him. She physically backs him into a corner of the room, and she playfully reaches for the book he's holding, but he clutches it to his chest like a shield. The camera is so close to their faces, and you can just see the sheer panic in Anthony Hopkins' eyes.
He looks absolutely terrified.
He is terrified of being seen, not because of the book, which turns out to be just a sentimental romance novel, but because he's terrified of her seeing that he has feelings, that he's vulnerable. And as her hand touches his, as she tries to gently peel his fingers off the book, it is agonizingly slow. She is effectively stripping him naked, emotionally, right there.
And he shuts down completely. He gets rigid and kicks her out. I ask you not to disturb me.
It is devastating. That one scene is the whole tragedy of the knot. Theirs is a love story that is defined entirely by what never happens. And we, the audience, are left to mourn the beautiful life they didn't have together.
That sense of mourning leads us to a different kind of time pressure. The ticking clock. Let's talk about Call Me by Your Name.
A different kind of agony entirely, because here we know from the very beginning that Elio and Oliver have an expiration date. Oliver is a grad student who's only there for the summer. He's leaving at the end of it.
So you are pre-grieving the relationship while you are watching it happen.
Exactly. And that structure forces the characters, and by extension the audience, to luxuriate in the present moment. The director, Luca Guadagnino, becomes obsessed with sensory details. The juice of a perfectly ripe apricot, the constant sound of cicadas in the heat, the feeling of the Italian sun on your skin.
The visuals are so lazy and languid and beautiful, but the emotional undercurrent is frantic. It's this constant unspoken, we're running out of time.
There's a scene where they go on a bike ride and they just stop and drink water from a public fountain. It's completely meaningless to the plot, but it is essential to the feeling of the film. They are trying to drink in the very existence of the other person before they vanish forever.
It's the whole idea behind the infamous peach scene, this desperate desire to consume the other person, to make them a part of you.
Which is a very literal interpretation in that particular movie, yes. But metaphorically, it's about this deep-seated need for possession in the face of inevitable loss.
Okay, so we've talked about a single summer. What about a lifetime? We're close to it. The Before trilogy. Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight.
This is such a unique experiment in cinema. Richard Linklater, Julie Delpy, and Ethan Hawke created a romance that unfolds in something close to real time over 18 years of our lives and theirs.
We, the audience, wait 9 years between movies. The actors age 9 years. And the characters, Jesse and Celine, age 9 years.
It's an endurance test, a romantic endurance test. In the first film, Before Sunrise, they're in their early 20s. They're idealistic, they're naive, they just wander around Vienna all night talking about life and love. It's pure, beautiful potential.
And then, 9 years later, we get Before Sunset. They're in their 30s. And they're bitter. They're disappointed by life. Jesse is married unhappily. Celine has become cynical about love.
And that whole movie plays out in real time. He's in Paris for a book reading. He sees her there. They have about 80 minutes before his plane leaves. So the ticking clock is literal. It's the runtime of the film.
We have to discuss the ending of Before Sunset. Because it is, in my opinion, the greatest, most agonizing cliffhanger in the history of romance films.
It's just perfect. They're in her apartment. He absolutely has to leave to go to the airport. He's about to walk out the door. He puts on a Nina Simone record. She starts dancing to it, and she looks over at him and says, "Baby, you are going to miss that plane."
And he just sits there, and he smiles this little smile, and he twitches his wedding ring finger, and he says, "I know," and then it just fades to black.
And then we, the audience, had to wait 9 more years to find out if he actually missed the plane.
That is just cruelty. That's torture.
Brilliance. That fade to black is the slow burn. It leaves the entire audience in this state of suspended animation. We have to live in that apartment with them for a decade, just wondering.
It totally validates that idea that the unknown is where the magic really is.
Yeah.
If we had seen them immediately after, arguing about the taxi to the airport, it would have ruined the perfection of that one moment.
Precisely. The question is always more romantic than the answer.
Let's shift gears a little bit to landscape. We talked about sunny Italy. Let's talk about mud. Cold, wet, British mud. Let's talk about Ammonite in God's Own Country.
The geological extreme of romance, as some critics call it.
Ammonite stars Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan on the Jurassic Coast in Dorset. And it is bleak. It is gray. The soundscape is just wind and waves crashing against rocks.
The setting is absolutely a character in that film. It represents the emotional state of Kate Winslet's character, Mary Anning. She's hardened, she's calcified, she's practically fossilized by grief and hardship.
So when any hint of warmth comes into that landscape, it's shocking.
Yes, contrast is key. If you are in a warm, cozy rom-com apartment in New York City, a hug is nice. But if you are freezing to death on a windswept beach digging for ammonites and someone gently covers you with a shawl, that shawl is the warmest thing in the entire universe. Every small kindness burns brighter against the cold.
The source material we looked at describes the first kiss in that movie as being like watching ice crack.
It's a violent thaw, a sudden, shocking release of warmth.
And God's Own Country does a similar thing. But on a sheep farm in Yorkshire, you have a young farmer who is angry, alcoholic, completely closed off, and a Romanian migrant worker who comes to help him for a week during lambing season.
It's very similar in some ways to Brokeback Mountain, but with a, let's say, happier trajectory. The intimacy here is built almost entirely through shared labor. Birthing lambs, fixing dry stone walls, scrubbing mud off each other.
It strips away all the artifice of modern romance. You can't really be fake when you have your hand inside a sheep.
Well, quite. But it grounds the romance in the physical reality of survival. Learning how to be gentle when your entire life requires you to be hard is a profound act of love. Watching the main character, Johnny, learn how to touch someone without hurting them is the entire emotional arc of the film.
It's so beautiful. It frames gentleness as the ultimate erotic act.
Which, in a harsh and unforgiving world, it absolutely is.
Okay, we've done a lot of waiting, a lot of yearning. Let's talk about what happens when the dam finally breaks, when the slow burn actually explodes. Let's talk about The Handmaiden.
Park Chan-wook. This is not just a romance, it's a gothic thriller, it's a heist movie, and it's a revenge tragedy all rolled into one magnificent package.
The structure here is just fascinating. It's told in 3 parts, from different perspectives.
Right. Part 1 tells the story from the perspective of Sookie, the handmaiden. We see the seduction of her mistress, Lady Hideko. We feel the tension, but we think one thing is happening, that it's a con. Then Part 2 flips the entire script, and we see many of the same scenes, but from the lady's perspective.
And suddenly, every glance, every line of dialogue means something completely different.
That's the genius of it. The slow burn here relies on information withholding. We, the audience, are being seduced and tricked right along with the characters. We don't have the full picture until much later.
And when they finally consummate the relationship.
It feels like a revolution, because in that moment, they aren't just having sex. They are overthrowing the entire patriarchal system that has imprisoned them. The release of tension is political as well as sexual. It's incredibly powerful.
But sometimes, release doesn't actually solve the underlying problem. I'm thinking of blue as the warmest color.
Ah, yes. The paradox of consummation. This film is famous, or infamous, for its incredibly graphic, lengthy sex scenes. The burn leads to a massive explosion of intimacy.
But the critic's argument that I found so interesting is that the yearning doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't. Even when they are physically intertwined, literally as close as 2 human beings can get, the camera keeps focusing on the emotional distance in the eyes of the main character, Adele. It suggests a terrifying truth. You can possess someone's body and still be completely unable to reach their soul.
That is the ultimate tragedy, isn't it? The slow burn promises us that if we can just cross that gap, everything will be okay. This movie comes along and says, maybe not, maybe the gap is permanent.
It says that the gap is existential. You can never truly be another person, no matter how much you love them.
I want to touch on Moonlight before we move to the final section, because this film handles time in such a unique, fragmented way.
A masterpiece of structure. Barry Jenkins gives us 3 acts. Little, Chiron, Black. The character's life in childhood, adolescence, and adulthood.
And the romance. The deep connection between Chiron and his childhood friend Kevin is constantly interrupted by life. By poverty, by prison, by betrayal, by the performance of masculinity.
The slow burn here spans decades, but we only get to see these tiny, poignant snippets. And the final act, which takes place entirely in a diner, is a masterclass in everything we've been talking about.
The diner scene. Just incredible.
Kevin, now a cook, makes a meal for Chiron. And Jenkins focuses on the sensory details, the sound of the sizzling oil, the jukebox playing that perfect song, Hello Stranger. And you watch Chiron, who is now this hardened, muscular drug dealer with gold fronts, completely revert to being a shy, vulnerable child in the presence of the one person who has ever truly seen him.
You're the only man that's ever touched me.
That line just takes all the air out of the room. It reveals that the burn has been sustaining him silently for more than a decade. It's a slow burn of identity. He needed all that time apart, not just to miss Kevin, but to grow into a person who was finally capable of accepting love.
Sometimes you're just not ready for it yet.
Exactly. The timing has to be right, not just externally, but internally.
This brings us, to the modern viewer. We are the streaming generation. We binge watch, we consume content at 1.5 times speed.
It's the streaming paradox. We have the technology to skip all the boring parts. We can fast forward past all the longing and the staring and just get to the kissing.
But we don't, at least not with these stories. A show like Normal People, which is 12 solid episodes of frustration and miscommunication, was a massive global hit.
Normal People is a fantastic example. If you binge it all in one day, does it hit differently than watching it week to week? Maybe. But the fact that we sit through it at all proves that the journey is the point.
If you skip to the last 5 minutes of Normal People just to see if they end up together, you would feel absolutely nothing. It would be meaningless.
It's like skipping a 5-course meal to get to the dessert, only to realize the dessert is just a photograph of a cake. The hunger is what makes the food taste good. The frustration creates the capacity for satisfaction.
One of the critiques we read suggests that these movies essentially ruin you for regular films.
They kind of do. Once you have adjusted your dopamine receptors to the patient, meticulous pace of Portrait of a Lady on Fire, a standard Marvel movie romance feels, well, it feels plastic.
It feels unearned. You watch a regular rom-com where they kiss after 20 minutes, and you're like, ooh, slow down. You don't even know his trauma. You haven't stared at the back of his neck from across a room for 3 weeks.
It raises the bar. It demands that the characters, and by extension the filmmakers, do the work to earn our emotional investment.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the architecture of yearning, let's get a little philosophical.
Let's do it.
We've established pretty clearly that we love the torture, we crave the wait. But what does that say about us? Does this mean that we actually value the possibility of love more than the reality of it? Are we all just in love with the fantasy, with the chase?
That is the cynical view, I suppose, that we're all like Orpheus, preferring the dream to the person. But I'd argue it's something else. I think the power of the slow burn proved that what we truly value is observation. In a world where we are constantly projecting ourselves on social media, building our personal brand, main character energy, these films force us to do the opposite. They ask us to stop, to be quiet, and to simply witness another human being.
To just pay attention.
Yes, to watch them read a book, to watch them flex a hand, to watch them peel an apricot. The philosopher Simone Weil said, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." The slow burn is a genre that demands our attention. And giving that attention, in itself, is a kind of love. It proves that the most romantic thing isn't the first kiss. It's everything that leads up to it.
The next time you're on your couch, screaming at your TV at 2 in the morning, just remember, you're being generous, you were paying attention.
And you're enjoying the exquisite agony of it all.
And enjoying the torture. Thanks for diving in with us on this.
Anytime. Until the next one.
Some stories end, but the ones that matter don't. They echo in the quiet moments, the late-night thoughts, the places where your own memories rise to meet them. That's what we explore here at Backstory Movies. Not just what a film shows, but what it stirs. The longing, the almost, the ache that stays long after the credits fade. If something in today's episode stayed with you, a scene, a feeling, a question, follow that thread. There's more waiting for you. Visit BackstoryMovies.com for deeper dives, cinematic guides, and stories that make you feel something real. Until next time, keep watching closely, keep feeling deeply, and remember, the best stories don't end. They begin again with you.